All right. So yes, the one with the highest interest rate, but you also want to check as well which one is the largest debt, right? Because when we're looking at your APR, the higher debt may have a lower APR, but you may be paying more in interest. So you actually want to review it and do the comparison. So you want to drop the one that you're paying the highest interest on, but also just check both.
All right. So this question, ideally, what is the highest amount of your credit limit that you should use? A, 50%, B, 75%, C, 33%, or D, 25%?
All right, 33. So ideally, especially for your credit utilization, you want to keep it under 33%. Once you hit between that 33 and 50%, you'll see your credit score take a slight dip. Anything above 50%, you'll start seeing your credit score dip even lower. Ideally, you only want to use 30 to 33% of your available credit that you have. So example, if you have $10,000 credit card, you want to keep that balance under $3,000, but it will be a total of all of your credit cards. So if you have 3 credit cards, it'll be the total of it. It could be $25,000. Now you want to keep that under 33%.
And for our, yes, Sister Gillespie.
Do you get penalized for not using up your credit? You know, say you have $10,000 in credit and you might just use $200, and is there a penalty to that?
No, but you're doing good, right? Keep it under utilization, still use the credit. Now, if you're only spending $200, the company might decrease your credit limit because you're showing that you don't need the full limit. That's based on them and how they actually do their reviews. But always just use it for what you can pay off.
Well, it sounds like we have a pretty knowledgeable group before us here today, so we should be able to breeze through a lot of what we wanted to cover. So we'll move on now to discuss what our goals are for this session. Oh, sorry. Thank you so much. So what would be considered an excellent credit score? A, 400 to 500, B, 700 to 850, C, 551 to 699, and D, 851 to 1000. B, okay. Yeah, any 851 to 1000, a little bit of a trick question. Most of them only go up to 850. So yes, B, 700 to 850. All right, so we'll go over now the goals that we have for our session today. The first one is to understand the role of God in your money management activities. Learn some of the basic concepts of money management, share practical tips, and share timely tax planning information for the upcoming tax season. So what does the Bible have to say about money management? So I'll turn over to Kevin. And we'll spend a little bit of time talking about Joseph.
Okay, so don't quote me now. But the thing I loved about the story with Joseph, right, and money management, when Joseph received his dream, when the Pharaoh received his dream of the 7 cows, 7 healthy cows, and then 7 bad cows, and then 7 ears of wheat, right? Corn, okay, and then 7 bad. So what Joseph was able to predict was that there was going to be a famine coming. So with that, what he was able to do was to proper plan for 7 years and start taking resources and allocating it, putting it to the side, so that for the next 7 years we will not starve. So by building community and taking the resources from all of the different nations, he was able to store up a surplus to get them through that 7 years of famine where there wouldn't be no growth. So through proper budgeting, right, and proper planning, and even as we look at where we are right now, and a lot of people will say it's a recession, we don't know where we're at, right? You want to start proper planning so that you can be good for the next few years. COVID has shown us that while planning for several years will actually be beneficial to us.
Thank you, Kevin, for that. And then the next parable that we'll touch about, or the one that we'll touch on quickly, is about the parable of the talents. And there was a man who went on a journey, and he gave his servants the wealth. He gave his wealth to them. So he gave one 5 bags, one 2 bags, and another 1 bag, and each according to what he thought they could handle. So what happened to the one who had 5 bags? He got 5 more. And to the one who got 2, and to the one who had 1, what did he do? Now, how many of you are hiding money in your mattresses? I hope no one here. All right. And so the lesson that I want us to take away from the story of the talents is to utilize what God has given you. So it may not be much, but any little bit God can use, and it can go to work for him. And if you entrust it to him, he will multiply it beyond what you could ever do with it. And with this in mind, you're not saving only for yourself. And that's what that topic is, saving to give. You're saving to be a blessing to others. It's not that you should hoard it unto yourself. But if others are in need and you're able to assist, I can't tell you how many countless stories I've heard of young people. They needed to go to college. And then all of a sudden, someone provides. And we need to have that giving mindset when we approach dealing with our own finances. Don't keep it in the mattress, please don't. All right, so we'll move on now to talk about 3 topics that we want to cover today with you. And that would be saving, credit, and budgeting, and how to address each one of those wisely.
So we'll touch on 2 savings categories, right? Short-term savings and then long-term savings. So just by show of hands, how many actually have a savings? Okay, good. So now, with having a savings, we want to break that down into short-term and long-term. So your short-term will really cover, what we have here? Planning for specific goals, large purchases and vacations. And then long-term goals, planning for your future self, maintaining your current lifestyle, disability, and retirement. So what I like to throw on short-term as well is just like, if I want, no, long-term, I'm gonna say car. I want to purchase a car. If I want to purchase a washer dryer for the house, right? Those are long-term commitments of things that may last longer. Now, if I want to go to a concert and I know it's probably $600 for a ticket, I may want to start saving now. So short-term, I'll start saving and putting away. So different ways to plan to save. So you want to decide, what are you saving for? And that's always key, your why. Sticking to your why. Once you know your why, it kind of helps with sticking to that path of, I know why I'm saving. That way you won't go in and out that savings account and utilize it for other resources. So you can use Post-it notes, pieces of paper, brainstorm. I like to keep a screenshot on my phone for certain important things. Utilize what works for you. And then also do your research to estimate the cost. Are there similar products being sold? So that way, especially for items that you're buying, budget for it, right? So is it $200 or is it $190? I can find it for cheaper, making sure I also do that as well.
And I think that, definitely with the evolution of the internet, there's a lot more information at your hands right now than you ever could. Before, you might have had to physically go to the store and get the price, and you got to go to this other store. Now you're like, oh, I'm in the store. Let me scan this barcode. Let me see where I'm going to get the best price for it.
All right, and the next, pick a time frame, right? So again, if I know I want to go on a vacation, how long am I going to have to save up this amount of money? So say $2,500, it may take me 6 months to save that up. So I want to start planning at least 6 months ahead. That way I can have the required resources at that time of the trip. So whatever your goals are, you want to make sure you outline your specific time frame that you want to achieve that goal. And that is also a reasonable time for you as well.
And then the last thing here, most importantly, is to commit those plans to God in prayer and to claim his promises. So 1 John 5:13-15 says, I write these things to you who believe in the name of the Son of God, so that you may know that you have eternal life. This is the confidence we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us, whatever we ask, we know that we have what we asked of him. So now that we've covered about the plan to save and committing our plans, now how do you actually do that? So remember what those numbers are. Spend below your means. And that means that if I'm bringing home $2,000 a month, or $4,000, I should not be exactly spending $4,000. I shouldn't even be going over that limit. You should plan to spend way below that $4,000 if you can help it. So can you manage the living or the lifestyle that you want at $3,000? Then you have a cushion that you're able to then take that money and put it to work for other things that you may want to purchase or retirement, other things of that nature. And it helps ease the stress. So if you know that you've been able to put money aside and something comes up, you have money. There's a rainy day fund that you're able to pull from to help yourself at that time. And then also reflect on what it is that you are buying. And we'll get into the budget a little bit later, but reflect on where you're spending your money. Otherwise, you don't know where it's going. You may be, I spent $3,000 this month. I know occasionally that happens to me. I get a bill. I'm like, where did I go? And then you look, it's like BJ's, Target. And it adds up quick. It at $50 here, $100 here, it adds up really quickly, right? So reflect on, well, this is really surprising. What did I buy this month, right? To also help you gauge that. And then to prioritize your needs versus your wants. And then the last thing here, if you're gonna save, have a place to put that saving. So open a savings account, have a CD, have something else. And this is specifically for the liquid savings, the money that you want. If something happens tomorrow, you can go and pull it right away. So manage and research the available options. The only options are not Chase, Bank of America, Citibank. There's a lot of now online institutions. I'm not advertising for any particular one, but American Express has high yield savings accounts. So does Discover. So does Goldman Sachs, Marcus. So there's other options that may not be a local brick and mortar bank, but they will offer you a better savings rate, better than the 0.01%. And then also something else that you can do, there may be banks where if you move your money to that bank, they give you bonuses, right? Or it may be linked to I know Miles, I think like Citibank, they have active promotions around if you open X checking account, you'll get like American Airlines miles. And that might be something you can convert into something that you would enjoy. So look into all of those. All of those represent options. So the next slide really talks about, the liquid savings options. Yep. So you have your regular savings. That's just, you go to your bank, you open that regular savings account. There's no term period. The interest rate is usually very low. And it's easy access. And then you have something that's a money market. So that generally maybe a little harder to access. Some accounts may come with a penalty on early withdrawal, but they have a slightly higher interest rate. And then certificate of deposit, while liquid, it's still the most restricted form because there is a lockup period before you can take that money out. Now, if you really need that money, don't let that penalty defer you from taking that money out, but there is a lockup period for it. And what I've heard of people doing as well is they structure those CDs. So they have things that mature every 3 months. And by that, I mean, if you needed, say you needed money a year from now, right? You might put your money in 1 9-month, you might split it up, a 9-month CD, a 6-month CD, and a 3-month CD. So as those actually reach the maturity date, that money becomes available to you and you've earned the interest, no penalties on it. So those are some options that are. And then lastly, your brother Skinner is asking, are CDs the best in terms of the liquid savings?
I'm gonna say no and do your research, but there's different other options. But with CDs, they come with variable rates, so they fluctuate as well. And then based on how long you hold them, which usually with 5 to 10 year periods, you have a higher interest rate. And then anything 3, 6, 9 months comes with a lower interest rate, but higher than what's actually on your regular savings account. But again, you want to compare what's in like those online savings account, like Marcus and Discover. They have high interest rates that are probably comparable to the actual CD rates. So you just want to see what's the best option for your time frame.
Without the lockup as well. So lastly here on the short-term saving, this was just like an example for us to break down how you would feasibly do this. So if we'll go to the next slide, if you wanted to say you wanted to buy a $2,000 computer for school, I know school season actually just ended, but let's say somebody's going off to college next year and you want to buy them a laptop for school. You have 5 months, right? So how much would you have to save every month to buy the computer? So you would take that $2,000, you divide it by 5 months, and you get $400 a month. And each one of these other answers is going to break it down further for you. So I know I need to save $400 a month, but how much is that in a week? So I'll take that and I'll divide it by 4 weeks. That's supposed to be like average 4 weeks in a month. And then how much do I want to save per day? $14.29. So maybe you look and you see I'm buying lunch every day when I go to work. I don't bring any lunch in, and I'm spending $18 a day on lunch. If I stop buying lunch every day, I can afford to buy this laptop in 5 months. So by saving less than $15 per day, you can buy the computer. And creating the savings plan will help you learn how to reach your goals. So breaking down that big, massive goal into small, tiny bites helps you actually visualize how you're going to get there.
And I think you touched on an important thing too, right? When you break it down by day, and then if you actually look at your budget and see where you're excessively spending, you look for ways where you can actually take out your budget and reduce. So again, I stop buying lunch, you'll be able to get to your savings goal closer, faster.
Yes.
You mentioned about long-term and short-term saving. Do you recommend you do that in the stock market also?
So the purpose of this session today was not to necessarily go over the stock market, but over time, the stock market has shown to be a decent and a reliable way to grow your investments. But again, going into the stock market, everything carries risk. And so you have to make sure that you're selecting investments that match up to your risk tolerance. So for example, let's say you really don't want your money to fluctuate too much, right? You may develop a risk portfolio that is very little in stocks and probably more heavy in bonds. But it depends on what you want to get out of a certain time period. So the more time you have in the stock market, the odds are you'll do better, and you are able to take more risk, right? So somebody who's just starting work. We have our dear April over there, still very young in her career. And she may say, I want 90% stocks because she has 40 years to see how the market is going to do. Someone who may be on the other side of that, who maybe only has 10, 15 years to play with, you may be more risk averse, and you'll say, no, I can't have too much fluctuation. I can't afford to lose what I put in. I can only gain, but that gain that I'm going to get will be small because you can't take that big risk. So you have to figure out what's your time horizon that you're working with in terms of selecting those investments.
And the key is saving is savings, and then stocks is investments. So that's just straight risk. Once you go into the stock market, you're risking your money, and based on the predictability of what's going to happen. Your savings account, it's not going to disappear if I just sit there. It's going to get that fixed interest rate. If you don't look at your stock in 2 days, it could be gone. Or you could be a millionaire, either or.
Yes, there's another question.
Yes, and for April, that's perfect. But for anyone, I'm thinking if you're getting ready to retire, let's say within the next 4 or 5 years, what would you recommend? Because I recall a few years ago, a lot of my colleagues had heavily invested in the stock market. And that was in the mid-90s. And a lot of them lost a lot of money because they were getting ready to retire within a year. And so they didn't have enough time to recoup the losses that occurred. So what would you suggest for someone, let's say, that's retiring in another 4 or 5 years? How should they, because a lot of companies, if you have money within the company, they do invest in the stock market and they give you options, variables or fixed. What would you recommend for someone who's thinking of retirement, let's say within the next 4 or 5 years?
At that point, you should be talking with your financial advisor on a regular, making sure how your profile is set up is how that will fit your lifestyle, right? So we can't really recommend it because we're not financial advisors, but that's where I would direct you to a financial advisor to have those recurring conversations to make sure what you are invested in fits your lifestyle. So if you want it to have more risk, if you want less risk, you'll have that conversation with your financial advisor, and they'll be able to give you more instruction on how you should have your money invested.
Yes, and I guess just to add on that a little bit more directly, to try to answer your question without putting ourselves completely on the hook for it, is that as you get closer to that age, you want to reduce your risk. You're not looking to increase your risk. And so what's going to happen is, what the financial advisor would likely recommend is that you're moving out of stocks. That stock balance in your portfolio starts to go down, because that, as Kevin identified, that is completely out of your hands what happens in the stock market. Right? Any other questions? Okay. And then the last example here that we wanted to show was just around long-term savings. And on the next slide, I'm not sure you will be able to see it very clearly, but the thing that's to point out here, the longer you wait, and this one is more addressing investing, the longer you wait to invest, the more money you have to put in to get to the same goal. So if you see here on the top line, if you can't read it, at the age of 25, you may have 40 years until you retire at 65. And if you wanted to get to $500,000 at that age, you would only have to invest $189 a month. If you wait until you're 30, you have to invest $276 to reach the same goal. If you wait until you're 35, you have to invest $407, and so on and so forth. So by the time you're 50, you have 15 years to retirement, and you want $500,000, you have to put aside $1,568 and then hope that you can get a 7% growth, because that's what's being used to do these calculations over 15 years. So the message here may not be applicable for some of us, but definitely to the younger people that you know, do it early. It costs you so little when you do it early. And also to be consistent, because this is how much you would have to give every single month for 40 years, 30 years, etc. No, this is not a CD. This would be an investment like in the stock market. Yeah.
Hi, it's not really a question. So this session is good for, the nice age group, but I noticed you made a reference to the younger group. Is it possible to do another session just dedicated for the younger people? Because some of them do have careers like April, but they just feel like they're going to be young forever. And I'm going to just personalize it. I see the big envelope come home almost every 3 months. And I'm saying, here it is, I need you to start. But, so maybe someone who's in the financial world having a program just dedicated for younger people who they really need to hear for someone who is kind of closer to their age. It resonates a lot better sometimes.
Thanks, Susan. And thank you, Susan, for that point. And we'll probably have to bring it back for our younger people. But also just, the whole idea here is everybody needs to save, no matter what end of the age spectrum you are. There are always things that you're going to have to plan for as long as you're alive, right? And God gives you breath. And so making sure that you understand the way that you're going to develop a savings plan, how you're going to actually get there, and what it takes is what we wanted. Yes, not a question.
All right. I have a question. What school of thought do you guys recommend? Say someone wants to get into learning financial literacy. Do you recommend Dave Ramsey or Robert Kiyosaki?
I'm not going to recommend neither specifically. Nothing bad about either person, but there's various different tools to use out there for financial resources, right? Not just there's different organizations that provide resources as well. I think it's just finding out what works for you, and then it's also about your habits. So it's not about who's teaching you. Find various teachers to get the knowledge, and the knowledge is in the palm of my hand now. It's just about finding and get through to you, and then also reevaluating your habits that will actually make what you're learning stick.
All right, you got any recommendations then? Any sources, books, websites, YouTube, podcasts?
Top of my head.
Yeah, we'll get back to you by the end. We'll get back to you by the end. Because a lot of Kevin and I have been working with a lot of these materials, so we do research to actually develop documentation. But I don't
like me. I piece from a lot of different sources. So whether I walked into a seminar and someone gave me great resources and it stuck and I verified it, now that's going into my presentation. If it's a book I read, I mean, I can read the whole book. Just pick up the specific chapter, grab what I need out of it. Watch 10 minutes out of a different podcast. There's definitely a podcast called On Your Leisure. They give a lot of different financial gems. So I think that's a great one right now, On Your Leisure. There are two young Black brothers that are out here educating people that look like us. They're also adding their own twist to it as well.
And then there's also just a general resource, 360 Degrees of Financial Literacy. And that's a program that's offered by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. So.
And then I'm going to throw the NABA in there because as well, like we do with the Financial Literacy Committee, we go to different high schools and actually talk to them as well, different colleges, and then also to our professionals. So I'm going to recommend us.
And if we can move on to the next slide. So just a reminder here from Solomon, dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow.
All right, so now we're going to get into credit. Now, by show of hands, who got an 850? Because I need you to co-sign something for me. Now, so with credit, right? What is credit? Credit is the trust which allows one party to provide money or resources to another party, wherein the second party does not reimburse the first party immediately, but promises either to repay or return those resources at a later time. So there's different types of credits, right? We have revolving credit, we have installment credit, and charge cards. There we go. So what is revolving credit? This is a form of credit that allows you to borrow up to a certain amount. Then we have charge cards. This form of credit is often mistaken to be the same as a revolving credit card. And then installment credit it involves a set amount borrowed, a monthly payment, and at a set time frame. So an example of installment credit, do we have it on the next slide? But if not, installment credit would be your car payment, right? Monthly, you know how much your car payment is every month. Revolving credit is your credit cards, and then your charge cards would be more like an American Express card that doesn't have a limit. But not all American Expresses like that. Usually, traditionally, American Express wouldn't have a limit, but now they do give cards that do have limits. But traditionally, whatever your balance was, you would pay it off at the end of the month. If I spent $4,000 on a charge card, they want their $4,000. All right. So, how can we actually check our credit, right? So we went over the various scores that you can have earlier. What's the top score? You actually want to check not just your score, but what's on my report. What is on my credit? Does everything actually match up, right? You want to verify those information. So you can actually get a free report of your credit on Annual Credit Report. They allow you to download this report one time a year, every year. So if I download it today on 12/17, I can't re-download again until another year. There are other resources like Credit Karma. They're great to actually review your credit score as well, but you want to look in depth at all three reports, which will be your TransUnion, your Experian, and your Equifax. So that annual credit report will give you everything that's listed on there. And one key thing I always say when you're checking your credit, your report, verify all the information that's there, especially because credit theft is real. So make sure all the addresses that are there are yours. All the accounts that are open actually belong to you. And other one. Oh, they actually put your employment history on there too. So just verify that too.
And then something to add is that a lot of the credit card companies, they also will provide you with a free credit report. So you have to look and see your credit card issuer, what are the benefits that they offer, because you may already have access to something. Yes.
Why is it that you get your credit report from 3 different sources and they have 3 different credit rates?
I don't remember the technical answer on that one. You know that one?
They have different ways of evaluating your credit, and that's really why there's 3 different ones.
And
They
those are
use
just
different
the
factors.
top 3
Yeah.
companies that they actually utilize. There are other credit reports out there as well, but those just happen to be the top 3 that most companies or organizations are going to use when evaluating your score.
And it's actually to your benefit that there are 3 different ones, because if it was only one person who could give you the score and they were like, your score is 500, you probably would not be able to do much with that. But because of the different factors that they use to develop the scores, one may say 500, one may say 550, one may say 600, and depending on what type of purchase you're trying to make, they may be okay and accept the highest one to use that for your credit determination.
All right. So now with the credit score, knowing that 850 is the highest, right? Everyone wants to know, how do I actually get up to that level? So it's actually understanding what makes up your credit score. You have it up there. So if you look at the red category, nope, let's go to the blue. The blue category, that is your payment history. That makes up 35% of your score. So one late payment affects 35% of your score, right? So it may not take it down the total percentage that the 35% covers, but understand paying on time it holds that much percent of your score. Second part is the amount you owe. Back to having that utilization, right? You want to keep that your utilization under 33%. So your amount owed on all of your available credit, that weighs into 30% of your score. And then we go down to new credit, that is 10%. And then the type of credits you have, how diverse is your credit portfolio, that is another 10%. And then the length of your credit history is 15. So how long have you actually had credit available to you? How long have your accounts been open? One thing I realized a lot of people notice, if you have student loans, when you actually pay off your student loans, because they're the longest debt traditionally that most people have, you close your account, you'll see your credit score take a hit because one of your accounts that have been open the longest actually have closed. So paying off your student loans is a great thing, but also expect to take a credit hit right after.
All right, so we won't spend too much time on this, but this next slide, but it just goes over, what is a good credit score, and we've already established that you want to be in that 700 to 850 range of people. Oh, a bad. I mean, it's right there, right? 300 to 550. That's very bad. You're going to get the highest interest rates. So when you see those advertisements for leases, cars, those are the easiest examples to point to. And they're like, yeah, you can get this car for $199. No, that's not your rate. That's not the price you're going to pay. You're going to pay probably like 500, 450, something that's really high.
And that's all just the interest, right? So see where that yellow line is, 670 and under, you're going to pay a higher interest rate to borrow money because based on your credit history, they don't believe you're a good borrower. You're a risk to them. So they're going to charge you a higher APR rate. But the more higher your score is, say, okay, we're going to lend to this person, but at a lower rate because they present less risk to us.
Yes, Ms. Dobson has a question.
It's more of a statement. For young people that are taking student loans, it's important that you try to get a student loan from the government and not the bank, or any other private thing, because when you don't pay on time, they call your phone down and what have you. But when you borrow from the government will send you a letter. The government will work with you to pay whatever you can, and they will defer your loan until you can pay it. And this is a key thing that a lot of students don't know, is that while you're in school, try to pay as much of your student loan back as you can. Because once you graduate from college, the interest rate is yours. While you're in college, the interest rate is the government's. But once you graduate, you have to pay it. And so you got to budget and make sure you're paying a little every month while you're in school. So when you graduate, you have a lower amount.
And I'm going to add to that, right? You made a great comment on don't borrow from the banks and you can actually utilize the loans from the government. I'm going to say avoid the loans from the government as well, right? There is a lot of resources out there, a lot of scholarships, a lot of grants that are available, a lot of funds that are available for our community. Part of NABA, we give out a lot of scholarships to students. So there are resources to tap into before getting those loans. Because even deep down in my soul, to pay my government back money, to educate me, and y'all supposed to be governing us, it blows my mind a little bit. So it's like, how can I avoid that? Now, everyone can't, and those sometimes we have to take on those options, but try to tap into a lot of the different scholarships and resources that are out there. And there are also philanthropists that just want to give money out. They do it all the time. So tapping into in your community and different resources and finding out where can I get these funds from before actually stepping into that student loan debt. So usually you go right into Google, right? Type in your phone, scholarships and grants available. There's different websites. I don't have them off the top of my head. There you go, right? Tapping into those resources.
The financial aid office, whatever school you go to, has free money, but you have to ask for it. If you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. I'll just share a quick story with you. When I was doing my master's, there was a minority student loan. They was giving away $2,500. No, that's a lot of money. You know, to my son, $2,500. This is when I was going to downstate. I'm gonna keep it local. And I applied for it and I got the money. So I was a little braggadocious about it. Like I won the scholarship. And I was like, who did I beat? How many people signed up for it? So Mr. Graham, you're the only one that signed up for it. So you're the only one that got it. $2,500. That all went to Mrs. Graham anyway in our Amazon account, but that's another day for another story. So, but the fact is, they're gonna tell you this. If you don't ask, it's just like the Bible. If you do not ask, you will not receive. That financial aid office, and I'm not trying to say people are corrupt. If you don't ask, I'll even go even further. I have 3 scholarships at my alma mater, and I have $5,000 sitting there for nursing scholarships, and it haven't moved since I graduated. All right? You know why? Nobody asked for it. How dare you? Oakwood University. So it just stays there. So if you are looking for something, before you Google, I'm not saying anything, just make sure you ask a financial aid. Do you have any minority scholarships? Do you have any scholarships for left-handed students? Do you have any scholarships for parents who are from South Carolina? It's amazing. There are people who give money, let's just say, because my mom and dad is from the Caribbean, right? They have people who give money to kids for kids from the Caribbean, but you have to ask for it. I don't know what it is and what it is.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary. All right, Brother Rose, if we can go ahead to the credit tips slide, because we're going to have to move here pretty quickly. Our time is running out. So some of the credit tips, if you're going to use credit cards, and I know some people may say, I don't want to use any credit cards. Credit cards in themselves are not bad. They help you build credit. They give you access to a lot of benefits too. Let's say you're renting a car, right? You may not have to take out the additional insurance on the car because your credit card has car rental insurance. So they also provide different kinds of benefits. But what you want to do is pay it in full every month. Don't put anything on that credit card that you cannot pay at the end of the month. Now, if you do have something that you need to spread out over time, things that you can do, maybe at that point in time, you will apply for a card that gives you 0% interest for like 18 months or 12 months. Things that I've personally done. I call my credit card company. You have any promotional rates? Yeah, for you, yeah, we'll give you 0% for 9 months. Just call. Sometimes you may have to threaten to close a card. Like, okay, I'm going to close the card. What are you going to do to keep me? We might give you 5% interest for 12 months. But there are different levers that you can pull to make credit work to your benefit.
You know, Sister Erin, just the other day, I did that maybe a couple of months ago. I called the 3 credit card companies and said, can't you lower my rates? Just simply that, I called and said, can you lower my rates? And they gave me a promotional rate for the next 2 years, and also it's going to come back in at a lower rate after the next 2 years. All I did was ask.
Yep, just ask. So I would advise everyone tomorrow or Monday, when you have some time this upcoming week or over the Christmas break, just call them up and ask them what do they have for you. That's your homework. That's your homework. All right. So, Brother Rose, we'll jump ahead really quickly and try to get through budgeting as quickly as we can.
The question here.
Oh, okay.
Yes. If we can go to a biblical view
Okay.
on budgeting.
All right.
Fine.
The question is that I'm hearing about RNs, right? I don't know if it's LPN or doctor's assistants, that they have grants that's being given. I heard 125 million because there's supposed to be a lot of nurses that were on the front line that want to like step off. And then I heard a special grant being given to minorities. Do you know about that? Because it's somebody that I'm saying, okay, why are you just talking about CNA when?
Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of knowledge about that, in that if you are, and this is not only for nurses, but I think it's also applicable for our teachers, if you are working in underserved communities, there are grants and like loan payback programs that you can apply for, but there are certain periods of service that you have to spend in those communities. But that's something that, Google, the internet, best friend, nursing grants, and you will get a wealth of information for that person. All right. So what does the Bible have to say about budgeting? So in Proverbs 24, and everything that these two are coming to us from Solomon, Proverbs 24:27, put your outdoor work in order and get your fields ready. After that, build your house. So what is Solomon talking about here? Make sure your needs are together, right? If you don't have food to eat, what do you care about building a house? So make sure that your needs are being taken care of. And in Proverbs 21:5, he reminds us also again, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste will lead to poverty. So don't go out and spending your money without having a plan and without figuring out what's going to be left at the end of the day. So what is budgeting really quickly? Budgeting helps us to figure out what our income is, what the expenses are, and how much we're going to have left over time. It will also help us identify what potential problems would be before they occur and help us plan for the future. That's like the whole thing about budgeting. So if you don't know the money that's coming in and the money that's going out, how can you even have any savings goals? You have no idea what's going on. That's what budgeting is supposed to help you do. So some budgeting steps. So let's go to the next one. Yep.
So budgeting steps, right? You want to assess your current financial standings. You want to actually have a list of all of your income that's coming in and all of your cash flows. And then have a detailed list of your expenses and outgoing cash flows as well. With that, you'll be able to identify different goals and determine additional savings based on your needs. And then the last one, add everything up and compare your income with your expenses. So once you identify how much I have coming in, how much do I have going out, then I can get a gist of where I can put some extra money to save. Do I need to stop spending somewhere? Am I operating at a surplus or am I operating at a deficit? This example we have here, it's the sample budget. So with your monthly income, right? You would first have, say, $1,600. Then you should be tithing and then savings. But we ain't gonna get there all the way. Let me say that for Sunday. So make sure you're tithing. And then also, first thing after that, I would say pay yourself first, right? Always set up an emergency fund. And I say if you can do anywhere between 0 to 10%. My rule, comfortably save 10% of my paycheck, and then I'll put that away first so I don't even see it. I like to do that through either my payroll company or on the day I know I get paid, if it's a set amount on salary, I'm transferring that part straight into my savings. So move without having it in my checkings. Then you want to have your rent, your utilities, your groceries, your clothing, entertainment. So in this budget, we have them spending $750 on rent and mortgage. They don't live in New York. Utilities $100, groceries for $250, clothing for $175, entertainment $100, and then miscellaneous for $25. So looking at this budget, this person started off with $1,600, and at the end of the month they have $49 left. So they would actually be operating at a surplus. What can you do with that $49? Can I put that additionally back into my savings account? Can I actually put this into another goal? Do I want to put this in the stock market and see where it can go? You get to make those decisions after you understand your budget and see where your cash flow is at.
So if we'll go on to the next slide, the most important thing, get a sense of where you're spending your money. So if you're doing a budget for the first time, just start tracking for 1 month to see how you're doing. There's different apps, there's mint.com, there's so many, there's an expense app that's in the Play Store on iPhone, so many things for you to track your spending. Also just review your banking statement. If you use your debit card, let's say all you use is your debit card, then just go through that statement and see where that money is going. A lot of banks will actually help you and categorize that spending for you already ahead of time when you log into your banking portal. Yeah, so a lot of these things that we've covered here already, but if you're married, take turns with your spouse, right? Maybe one person doesn't want the burden of managing the family finances, but it also helps you know what's going on if you occasionally do it as well. And then something else that I find helpful from a couple situation, have an agreed upon consultation limit for if you're going to spend above that amount, you got to talk about it. Hugh and I's amount is Hugh and our amount is $200, and it's been $200 for the whole time we've been married. So if either of us is spending above $200, we got to give a heads up. This is what I'm gonna be doing. And then I know we're pretty much out of time at this point, but we do have a couples quiz that we will circulate. And what that is supposed to do is just to figure out among you and your spouse, what is your financial compatibility? And it goes through a couple questions. If you answer true or false based on the responses, there's information here about what does that mean. And we don't have time to do our budget activity at this point because we're out of time, but we will jump ahead, Brother Rose, to where we see the year-end tax planning because we wanted to just touch on that point.
Yes. So as we get ready for tax season, remember, we're still in tax season. Tax season technically ends December 31st, 2022. So anything that happens within January 1st to December 31st, that's your tax year. But we report it in 2023. So everything for 2022, these are the things that you can start doing now to make sure you're ready for tax season. So gathering and analyzing your financial statements, reviewing any outstanding debt and income that you have, organizing all your tax forms. So how many jobs did I have this year? How many different contracts did I work, right? If I know I worked 5 different jobs, I should be keeping up with that and know I'm expecting 5 different tax forms. Do I have any dividends? Did I take any money out my retirement account? Did I get unemployment insurance, right? Making sure all of those documentations I know that I will need to gather, I will gather. If you don't prepare your taxes yourself and you go to a person, they will most likely ask for their SSN card, your birth certificate of the dependent, and a non-expired ID. I see a lot of expired IDs, so I always remind people just update your ID. And then another thing for year-end tax savings, looking at maxing out your contribution accounts. So understanding, say, like our tax rate. If you make about, say, 55,000 and you're single, if I actually take, say, 10,000 and put that in, say, even 3,000, right? I can put that into my retirement account. That would save me 8% in taxes because I would switch from the 32% bracket to the 24%. So actually putting money into your retirement account can actually help you save on taxes based on how much you earn and falling in between that AGI. So you can utilize different accounts like flex spending accounts, understanding any last minute deductions, and then utilizing if you have a high amount of gains from selling stocks, you might want to look at some stocks that you might want to let go just to reduce your capital gains. And then important deadlines, right? For 529 contributions is December 31st. For your IRA, you have up until April 15th of 2023 to contribute for the 2022 year. And then tax season deadline is April 15th, unless they change it and let us know.
So hopefully today from our conversation, you will work on having a plan for your future. Hopefully that for some of you, this will help you develop your plans of financial stability and help you to be a good influence in your community. This will also, when your kids see that you're managing money appropriately, you're an example to them and to others in your family. And don't be afraid to talk to your children about money. I think that's something that we see in a lot of West Indian communities where the parents don't really share about anything that's going on with them. And we really need to change that conversation. I think it helps when you're open with your children about what your life situation is so they can learn from your examples. And then lastly, we all want to help set up our families for the future. And the Bible says in Proverbs 13:22, a good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children, but a sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous. And we've gotten a lot of nuggets from Solomon today because he had a lot to say about this. And we didn't get as much of talking about a giving plan, but giving back to your own local church. We're called to give back to God. He's asked us to return a faithful tithe and offering. And we can't expect God to do anything for us if we're not doing what he's asked us to do. And so in our last slide, we just have a text up here. It's from 2 Corinthians 9:6-8. Remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to bless you abundantly so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. So we thank you for your time today. I really hope that everyone got something from our presentation.
Thank you.
Amen. Amen. Sister.
And thank you to Kevin for volunteering his assistance today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the love.
Sister Irwin and Brother Kevin, thank you so very much. I get the feeling that there is a part 2 to this. Does anybody get that feeling? Let me see your hands. Say amen if you think there's a part 2. Amen. I get the feeling there's a part 2, Brother Kevin and Sister Irwin. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it. God bless you.
So we do have the couples quiz and we do have a sample budget. So Ayana, thank you so much. She has some examples for you to take home. Please raise your hand if you are interested in getting the document.
Thank you very, very much. So what a great day we've been having, and we're down to our last session this evening. And while Sister Ayana is giving out those documents, we want to thank Brother Kevin and Sister Irwin. While they're giving them out, we want to get ready for our final session, and that's the mental health and wellness session. And we're asking the question, how are our children doing? And the backdrop of this is we're living in a 24-hour cycle world. We're living in a world where violence is seen on a daily basis. We actually had 678 school shootings this year. Let me let that sink in again. Let me repeat that because I don't think you heard me. We had 678 school shootings in America this year. How do our children even survive this kind of thing from a day-to-day basis? Getting up, going to school, knowing that today might be the day. It's the questions that we're thinking about. And to kick off our panel, we have our own Dr. Diedrich Blue and his wife, Elfreda Blue, And we have here with us our own Gary Graham. He's Dr. Gary Graham very soon. So, you know, I feel like just speaking it into being, you know? What do you say, Gary? Come on up, guys. And they're going to be, Dr. Blue is going to be leading this discussion here. And I'm just going to give the mic over to him so that we can begin. Dr. Blue, let me come with another.
First of all, what a tremendous presentation that we just had. Amen.
Absolutely.
Where did they go? They must be out spending some money, eh? Well, that was great. I think that there's a lot to learn, and no matter what stage you are in life, about money management. Because I do believe that God blesses us, but He requires of stewards that stewards be found faithful. So on this afternoon, we have been charged with sort of asking questions about where are our children and how our children are managing in the world in which we live today. So we're going to just jump into it and begin to explore. I'm so glad that we have a son of Bethel. I said a son of Bethel. Soon to be Dr. Gary Graham. I'm going to put a prophecy on him.
Well, you know, you're the one that planted that seed, you and your wife. So for those who don't know, Dr. Blue has been my pastor, I don't know, it was like 14 years ago, right? 14. And this is kind of a great synergy that we have here. So in my younger adult years, Pastor Blue and Dr. Blue was very influential on what am I doing now. And you don't know this, when he was at North Park Church, he gave me my first presentation. So that's about 3 years ago. So we're doing
that's because he was from Bethel. We figured if he came from Bethel, he must be all right. Okay. Yeah. So, how are our children doing? We truly, right now, are living in a world that is radically different than what it was when I was growing up. And where most of us in here growing up. When I was growing up, when kids got into fights, they maybe threw some fists, maybe some words. But now a fight could end up in death. Kids are growing up in a world, as was said before, with 24-hour access to information. Kids are growing up in a world where parents are working all the time. There's a lot that children are dealing with. And so they have to deal with issues of mental health. And sometimes we don't think about children and their mental health because we're so busy dealing with our own issues. So I want to start the conversation today on something that's a little bit stark, really stark. Here's some facts and some stats, and I'm going to ask that the two of you would sort of respond to this one. In 2017, suicide has been the second leading cause of death in those who are 10 to 19 years old. Hear that? Suicide. Rates of suicide among Black youth have risen faster than in any other racial or ethnic group. Black males aged 10 to 19 years old increased the suicide rate by 60%. 60%. Black youth are twice as likely to die by suicide as compared to their white counterparts.
It's totally the opposite to the results or these statistics maybe 10 or 12 years ago when white people were the ones, white young children were the ones who were committing suicide often than Blacks. And now we've caught up and are going on the other side, increasing that number over. That is a drastic change.
Yeah. So Gary, being the mental health expert here at the table, you know, what are you saying? Why are our young people so distraught that they think that the only way out in life, the only way to live life, is to take your life?
TikTok. Starts with that. I'm just gonna keep it real with you. TikTok first, and now Facebook has morphed into Reels. Things that used to be pictures are now moving parts. So our kids are influenced by it. And you mentioned something.
Wait, but first of all, TikTok, what is TikTok? I mean, not everybody knows what TikTok is. Does everybody know what TikTok is?
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Let me put it on. Does the church have a TikTok account? Well, you should. So I'm gonna start with that. So that's another story for another day. You're working on that, right? Okay. So TikTok is a social media account. When I was coming up around a couple of years ago, 2008, it was Facebook. It was all rage. And then it went into Instagram. And now Instagram, Facebook, you used to have content and pictures. Instagram is all pictures. And now TikTok is video. So the way you communicate is through video. And the videos are short videos that really migrated from Snapchat. Snapchat was 15 seconds, now TikTok goes into 30 or 45 seconds. And you could talk about anything you want. So, all transparency, I could look at a TikTok for 1 minute, think it's 1 minute, and I look up on the clock, it's 30 minutes, and it's gone. It's very addictive. So I admitted it too. And depending on the algorithm, what you look at, it will find what you're looking for. So if you want to look like you want to hurt yourself, the algorithm changes into that. And so a lot of our young people who, I'm just going to say, who's coming to church and you think they're reading their Bible in church, they're looking at TikTok and they're being influenced on it.
So you're saying that just by watching social media, young people are being fed information and they find themselves in the information loop. And that's increasing. You said that by itself is increasing, perhaps suicide?
I would say 60 to 75%. And I'll go even further, are Black young children.
All right. Well, let's in terms of this whole thing about suicide, I want to come back to TikTok and social media just for a second. But in terms of our Black children, can there be other kinds of factors that are impacting upon their psychosocial health and their well-being that would lead them to the place of hopelessness and despair?
I guess you could always find that to be the case for schooling and some of the experiences that students have in school. Some of them are, some kids may be depressed because they feel isolated and without the social community that they be able to find support. Some kids are finding themselves in school settings where they're not accepted. Some students may have disabilities and they feel ostracized, or they may have emotional challenges that interfere with their ability to interact and communicate with. Sometimes they feel like they don't have the social economic status or the social economic capital that would allow them to be popular. You know, there's a trend now that says that students think that they need to be famous and wealthy and all those kinds of things. So when our kids are feeling as though they don't have that money, they don't have that fame, they can't influence people, they're not the most popular people on the block, then those are the things that are leading them to turn to alternative existences or choosing to check out society.
I'll answer something on that too. Big shout out to our teachers who goes through a lot. And I think in retrospect, I think a lot of things that goes on at the home with the parents, what they say around their kids. So sometimes we raise our kids, I'm trying to find the right words, in a punitive style instead of a loving style. And I'll give you a perfect example. And this all comes from my work. You have a 11-year-old girl, mother is talking to you, and they say they're eating around Sabbath dinner, and it says, you know, Cheryl wets the bed all the time. And then in public, not in front of Cheryl, but in front of everybody else, and their parents go back home and say, well, you know, Cheryl wets the bed. And then for somebody like you or I, we have to reverse that, and you have to tell Cheryl, it's like, you know, you're not the only one that wets the bed in your class. That is a big psychological thing. And then when the girls get into an argument at school, it comes right on up.
And then it gets multiplied on social media.
Exactly.
Right.
Absolutely.
Where it turns into cyberbullying, where people now, because of what the mother said, they travel to somebody else, somebody picks it up, puts it online. Now all of a sudden the girl is being cyberbullied by everybody out there, even by people that she may not know, who are now telling her the most vile and vicious things about herself.
It's authenticated, Doc, by the mother.
Mm-hmm.
So your mom said it. Yep. So it's authenticated. I know you want to say something.
No, I'm just saying, I think that it becomes real. You also want to talk about the fact that sometimes as parents, we're growing up with our kids. And so if we are growing up with our kids, sometimes we don't make the best decisions. In the instance of the example that you just shared, there are sometimes parents who just don't like their children and who don't treat them well, and who, by virtue of the student or child feeling ostracized, they are leaning toward these behaviors that are making life difficult.
So yeah, we're going to take your question in just 1 second. I just want to review just for a second. We said that we have kids who are killing themselves, right? Who are prone to kill themselves. We said that perhaps they are being lured into dark places by being programmed through algorithms to see the same thing over and over again, right? We also said that because of social media, sometimes they have unrealistic expectations about what life is, what life should look like. And when they can't meet those unrealistic expectations, it causes depression, right? And isolation. We also said that it's possible that in the home, we have parents who may not understand that the authoritarian style of parenting may be causing their children distress. And especially if those authoritarian parents are saying things publicly, it has a multiplier effect upon that child, right? Yeah. So, yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, yes, okay.
Yes, Gary, you mentioned about the suicide rate among Black folks is tic-tac. But then you also mentioned that we should get a tic-tac account. It sounds like contradictory.
Yeah, so I could explain that.
And you say tic-tac is the cause of it. Can you elaborate a little bit more on it?
I could explain. China, who invented TikTok, has restrictions on what they show their kids. The United States, who also has TikToks, it's go for broke. So when you go on a social media account, as popular as I am and my brothers are, there are restrictions on that account. I don't have a TikTok account. If I had a TikTok account, I would have 100,000 followers, and then comes the endorsements and what have you. So I should say it with a little bit of TikTok knows what they're doing by leaving portals open here in the United States. China, which has a long-term business model or social economic model, does not want their kids to gyrate, to smoke crack, to talk back to their parents. You don't see that in China. So that's where I'm coming from, and I should have been clarified with that.
Gary, you guys mentioned several things, but the part that I'm acutely aware of is, and Dr. Blue mentioned it briefly, is the cyberbullying. There is a tremendous amount of cyberbullying, even at the elementary level of school. And kids are made to feel less than what they are. And when kids feel less than what they are, they become depressed. They become suicidal. And you'd be surprised to know how many elementary and middle school kids we have to be reported because they become suicidal because of bullying on the internet. And parents are allowing their kids to have access to these mediums.
So yeah, and I hear what you're saying. So my question would be, what role does the parent play in interrupting cyberbullying? Or what role does the parent play in helping to facilitate cyberbullying? Is there something that parents are doing, or there's something that parents can prevent from happening?
A lot of times parents are not even aware of what's going on, Dr. Blue, because a lot of the parents aren't as savvy with the technology as their children are. And when they're sleeping and think the children are sleeping, the kids are up all hours of the night on their computers, on their phone, and so that's part of what schools have to deal with. And so the reality is it's happening, and like you said before, it was happening in the white communities now because we've become affluent when it comes to the use of social media. So we're now becoming a part of that.
So I'm gonna ask the same question over here to our esteemed panel. Is there something that parents can do or should be doing that can either interrupt cyberbullying, prevent cyberbullying?
That you can take the phones away, but that becomes a problem, right?
That's a social issue in itself.
You can have a fight in your house if you take away phones. But turning it off, figuring out, coming with a plan on how to shut it down and control it would be great.
Yeah.
But kids have access to things outside the home, and they know how to borrow somebody else's stuff and bring it in the house. So it really comes down to a trust factor. You have to be able to figure out how to work with your child and fight for them to listen to you, because the world is really kind of taking over their thought process.
One of the things I do in my practice is, number one, you should not allow your child to take their phone to their bed. End of story. It's not embarrassing. I'm gonna say it again. Do not allow your child to go to bed with their phone, okay? You take the phone and you put it in your bedroom next to you. So if they wanna sneak, they have to crawl over mommy and daddy to get the phone. They're not gonna tell their friends, they're not. Pastor Blue, is this like when I was little at 8:30, we had worship at 8 o'clock, and Lloyd says, after good times, used to come on at a certain time at 8:30, and at 9 o'clock there was worship, right? We were so embarrassed that we went to bed early. We had to listen to my friends in the second grade tell the story what happened at Good Times on Thelma, and then go to the other class because you acted like you heard the story. You didn't take away their phone, you restricted it. Second thing, go onto your child's social media accounts, right? My son is listening to this, so I'm gonna tell him, my son has one picture on his Instagram account. Good looking kid. Now you think I'm a fool to know that he has one picture. My niece and nephew are 14 years old. They have 2,000 followers, and they go to Greater New York Academy, which has less than 500 students. So you tell me, you do the math. And then when your daughter puts a picture up there and she has 300 followers, and then she gets 1,000 likes, somebody's liking your daughter's pictures that shouldn't be liking it. It's all about math. So you have to be really be involved.
Dr. Blue, let me ask you just quick question. We have one person here.
He's a money man. He's not allowed to ask any questions.
He had a question here, Dr. Blue. Kevin.
All right, then we'll come back. Yes.
All right. This is definitely for everyone in the room. Bullying's been around since y'all been kids, right? The only thing that's morphed is how, right? So it's how do we get ahead of what we know? And I think it goes back to how are we affirming our kids? What are we feeding into our kids, right? The bullying could come via cyber or when they walk in the street. I was a victim of bullying and I had to grow tough skin, but it was also what did my community feed me? What did my parents say to me? What did everyone around feed into me, right? Because those outside pressures, they did get to me during high school, right? So I actually had to stand up and fight back for myself. But it's teaching our kids the right mindset and feeding that love into them throughout all years, right? So that they're more open to coming. It took me, I'll even go into this. The generational trauma of being beat by my parents led me not being able to go to them to tell them I was being bullied in school because of the beatings at home. So even that
Wait.
resulted how I was able to stand up for
I
myself.
want you to repeat that. Just repeat that again, because I think people really need to hear what you have said. You really need to hear what you have said, and then I'm going to say why I asked you to repeat it.
So the generational trauma of being beat during childhood made me, when being bullied in high school, not go back home and talk about it. I actually sat there and endured it and had to go through it. But because of not being able to go home to the person you say that's oppressing you and be open. So there's different outside factors of sometimes why kids are not open. As I said for myself, that was my reason for not being so vulnerable during it.
Yeah, sometimes parents, in our desire to raise our children correctly, it is possible that we could end up bullying our own children and setting them up for bullying. I mean, I'm going to say something here, and don't get mad with me when I say it. So, and Gary is big. If you come after me, I'm high behind him, right? But here's a real challenge that we have. It's a serious challenge. We as people of color, it happens in immigrant communities. It also happens in African American communities. We saw it when our people migrated from the South to the North, right? And what it is that we want our children to succeed. We want them to be disciplined. We want them to be on task. We don't want them to be like other children and fall into the same pitfalls. And so sometimes the parenting approach can be so authoritarian, so determined to make sure that this child does right and that the child does good, that you do the child wrong and the child ends up doing bad.
They stop talking to you because they're afraid to tell you about something bad at school, because then they might get a spanking for having been in that situation, right?
Yeah, like some parents will say, if you got bullied, did you beat him up? No, I didn't beat him up. Well, I'm gonna beat you.
Or did you call your brother?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So that's an important comment. Yes.
Hi, I kind of forgot some of what I wanted to say, but in reference to what Kevin just said, I think for a lot of parents, you kind of have to learn how to discipline your child without making them fearful of you.
Or embarrassment.
Or embarrassed.
Yeah.
Because you have to do it in such a way where your child know that no matter what, good or bad, you're the one person that will always be on their side. And so it's a tricky balance, especially based on your upbringing. And it's something that, speaking from experience, I had to learn that myself, because you want your kids to come to you at all times, and that involves for them being successful. In terms of the social media, it's not quick to say we take it away from them, because that's the world that we're living in. We're in a technological society, and the kids that we have now, they're technologically savvy. However, it doesn't take away from our role as parents. You have to control it. If it means when the child sign up for an email, because I have a 9-year-old right here. She has I'm so sorry. She just turned 10. Forgive me.
Yeah. We'll forgive your mother.
You saw her checker, right? Come on.
I'm sorry. She has an email address, but every time she logs in, that email comes to me. Your child logging in this device. Your child logging in this device. So I think as parents, even though you may not be savvy with the technology, you can be savvy enough to say, as Gary pointed out, the phone is going to be charged in my room. This, whatever site they're on, most of the sites have a parental restriction, where if the child signs on, whether it's a game, TikTok, or anything, where it can be monitored, because you're getting something to say that, she doesn't have a TikTok, but to say that you do? Okay. Well, I think her older sister signed her up for it. But you have to be able to monitor everything that they go on, because if you just leave them out there like that, then you're exposing them to a lot of different things. But you can't take the phone away from them and so on, because The schools are using it. They need the iPad. The schools are using it. However, there's a way to go about it where you monitor what they're doing.
I want to read you something real quick, and I'm gonna shut up and let the other panelists talk. But I want to read this to you. This is, we're gonna come to you right over there because you had your hand up for a while. Listen to this, right? One study conducted by the National Institutes of Health found that children who spend over 2 hours a day on their screens, right, received lower scores on language and critical thinking tests. Then it goes on to say, MRI scans of children who spend over 7 hours of screen time per day saw a thinning in their brain's cortex. So if there's ever any good reason for you to step up as a parent to find some ways to restrict the amount of unfettered access that they have, you ought to do that. It doesn't mean you take it away, but it does mean that you are the parent. You know, you can't have a kid snatch the phone. No, give me back my phone. Say, what? Have you lost your mind? No.
So I could give 2 other fire ways to help. This is hidden, just so you know. I don't have it. Your kid's siblings has your child's secrets. Don't you ever forget what I'm telling you right now. I grew up with 2 brothers. I know you have 2 sons. Even if they don't know, they know. And if you have a child, in my case, Patrick and Paul, you know, they're degenerate twins, right? My brothers. I was always responsible. I always knew what they were up to, even if they were thinking it. So if you out of options, go to the closest cousin or the sibling. That's why I have 1 child, right? The second thing I want to tell you what's going on online that people don't know. Those PS5s and those Xboxes that you're buying, there are other people in other communities that communicates with your child that act like they're 15 and 14. So you as a parent, there's 2 things that I did, 3 things that I did with my child. 1, I challenge him. If you want to get PS5 and you want to get 2K5, 15 or whatever, you got to play the whole tournament through. I'm not going to buy something for you. They get them the game and let them play the whole season through. Let them be the New York Knicks. Watch them who their color their avatar is. If your child is dark skinned and if they color their avatar light skinned, you got to ask that question. Why is your avatar light skinned? There's a reason for that. And instead of playing, and when they play on online community, snatch the headphone. Well, that's what Lloyd will do. Take the headphone from them. And they said, hey, who's this? Oh, this is Dedrick Blue. I'm playing on the other side. I'm 15 years old. Where are you from? I'm from Kentucky. When you're really from Long Island. And this is how they sneak in. Those curse words that you thought were yours, they belong to some guy in Iowa. So just remember, and the last thing is spend time. You have to know the language. The Christmas presents that you get, the list that you get now, you got to find out what it is because somebody else is grooming your child. You know, Sissy got All-American Doll. And, you know, Dr. Blue Day had this study. This man said that he went to All-American right there in Rockefeller and he saw no white kids. And the guy had to go there and show the difference. We have to keep on counteracting whatever. But remember, on your PS5s, your Xboxes, your Roblox, your YouTubes, there are people are not there just to have sexual predation with your kids. They're there to spoil our kids' minds. And you have to stay up on it.
So all I want to say is that I'm not going to comment on this because I raised children before all this technology came out. And they're grown men and women, whatever. But what I will say is that we're living in an age now where kids are being bombarded with technology. They're facing a lot of challenges in school. They may have great or not so great relationships with their parents. But the thing is that there are so many other influences that are greater than the kids. I mean, you know, we were talking about the shootings, school shootings or something. And it doesn't have to be in a school now. People are getting shot in churches and shot in grocery stores and shot all over the country. There's drugs that are available that were not available 10 years ago that are now that lead to death. Like the fentanyl is a drug that Black kids are starting to use. They weren't using it. When you thought about fentanyl years ago, it was something that white kids used in rural communities. But now that number is increasing among Black kids. And the side effect, I think, is that they die. If you just take it too much, then you die. It's not like you can be recovery. You can't be in recovery for that. So the things that kids are facing right now are mind-blowing and mind-boggling. And it seems like we're in a complicated time where before kids could just rely on their family units and their community, and as long as there's love and support, everything was great. But when they have the influence of the phone, the TikTok, the influence of the cyberbullying, or somebody who thinks that are gang members, or this LGBTQ connection. There are some kids who would think that they can be free to be who they are because their friends are free to be who they are. So there's a lot of peer pressure that is impacting on kids. And it's amazing, it's a miracle that they wake up and they're able to come to church and say happy Sabbath, or to sit in their seat and be kind to somebody, or just to listen and to follow the rules of the home. So we should applaud our children who are with us, that we can, as long as we can, let's applaud them. But we need to figure out how to give them the support they need. Maybe we need to be thinking about how we get support ourselves in order to deal with this. But we need to think about always looking at the things that we can't see. There are so many variables that we can't see. And if we don't see them in time, we have trouble on our hands.
Amen. All right. Yes, madam.
Okay. Dr. Blue, you touched on something that I wanted to talk about. As we talk about the stats and suicide shift thing from white to Blacks. And one of the things is the sexuality that we've seen in school, this LGBTQ, cis, whatever it is, it's impacting our children. And from a very, very young age, we find kids in second grade who cannot figure out, who have decided, I don't want to be called male or female, I'm this or I'm that. And we see that a lot among our children. So that is a big issue that we have to deal with because we don't want to talk about it. The parents don't want to deal with it. And so one can understand what they're going through. And I've seen in the area where I worked, a lot of young kids that are struggling because of that. The other one, as we talked about social media, we have, because of socioeconomic situations where parents are working, many times parents are not seeing their children. Children are at school from 7:30 in the morning. They're leaving school at 6:30. Some of them are, I don't know who they're not going home to parents, siblings. But their parents, I have a situation where I would call a parent to talk about a child and the parents would be like, I haven't seen the child. They don't see their kids because when the child is leaving in the morning, parents are at work. And when the child get home, parents are at work. So the parents come home, they sleep, and and so they're not seeing their children. I've seen kids come in at 8 o'clock. I'm walking in and at 8 o'clock, their children coming in, they're sleeping. Why are you sleeping? Why are you tired? They've been up all night. They've been on their whatever platform. And so we have a real problem with our children.
Yeah, let's see if we can talk about at least a couple of these things that you mentioned. You talked about the increase of LGBTQIA, and in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we have a tendency not to talk about these things, right? But just because we don't talk about it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, or it doesn't mean that it's going to go away, right? You mentioned the fact that children are exposed and are coming to conclusions about their sexual identity even before they reach the age of puberty. And how does that occur? I mean, some of that may be occurring as a result of socialization rather than, basic identity formation, right? In public school environments, it is not uncommon to have these kinds of discussions. So one thing I would say, as a way of allowing your child to have a healthy environment where these things are not introduced to them in the second grade, is to put them in church school.
Exactly. It's true.
You know, and that doesn't mean that it doesn't occur in church school, right? But it's not part of the curriculum of church school.
And there's a social guardrail too.
There's a social guardrail. Now, does that mean, now let me just clarify real quick. Does that mean that we are saying that there are not children who have this orientation? I'm not saying that. Does that mean that we should not minister unto them? I'm not saying that. Does that mean that if someone exhibits a certain behavior that we should not love them? I am not saying that. Because the mission of the church is to embrace everybody, red, yellow, black, and white. Doesn't matter where they come from. We take them in, we love them, and Christ has the power to work and transform and to save whosoever will let them come. Right? So that's one issue. But then the other issue, I'm just going to address it before we get to the next question, about the whole idea of present parents, absentee parents, and the impact. Not only does it have upon the child's freedom, what impact does an absentee parent have upon the child's psychological well-being?
He's so sharp.
Wait, let's get the answer. No, we want to get we're going to get the answer first before we get to that question, okay? So from our yes.
So absentee parents it goes in two sections. Either parent not there. 3 sections. You could have 2 parents and one work all day and all night and one parent is raising the child. Or you could have 2 parents, and I'm gonna take from the father's point of view. The father is there and don't do anything. When I mean anything, go to your mother for this, go to your mother for that. So those are absentee parenting. And the third absentee parenting is not talking about it. So between us, we have 3 boys here, right? And I'll speak for myself and what have you. And then it's usually in the 2nd grade, I'll be transparent. You check out your sexuality. You wonder why you're not wearing earrings. Or you may go into your auntie's polish your nails. That's what boys do. Let me tell you that's what boys do. But then when the boy comes back with the fingernail polish, you're dumb, you're stupid. We don't do that at his church. See, our Republican counterparts has a nice way of saying it at home, but a dirty way of saying it in public. Our church, and I could speak for my former pastors, we are very loving to the LGBTQ community. But I don't think our church knows how to say, Tony, you don't see mommy wearing nail polish, so maybe you need to hold off on that. You don't see daddy wearing earrings. You don't want to hold off on that. You don't see Uncle Patrick or Uncle Paul wearing tattoos. There's a reason why the church holds these standards, because our forefathers and our foreprophets saw this years ago of what's happening now. So when our Republican counterparts in Florida and in Michigan starts talking about, they twist it into hate instead of love. Now, I'll be a liar to you. When my son came home with his first girlfriend from Oakwood at 19 years old, I breathed a sigh of relief. I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to tell you the truth, right? But I was also prepared to tell the Bethel Seventh-day Adventist Church and the Ephesus Church, this is the path my son have chosen. I love him the same way. And God is going to save him no matter his path. We don't even have that conversation. I could guarantee you, and this is a knock on Gary Graham himself and my brothers and everything, guarantee you for the next 52 weeks in the AY, we will not have that LGBTQ conversation. We can't even have that conversation to accept before we say mommy and daddy think is wrong. As for me in my house, we don't watch TV on Friday nights. The best conversations in absentee parent, and I'm talking about the fathers. After tonight, I'm going home and I'm watching the Bills beat the Miami Dolphins tonight. I can guarantee you, Dr. Blue with his two sons, if they're not at the house, they're going to have a conversation about that. And within those conversations, you have the conversation. I'm talking about fathers in absentee, where that is concerned. I'll just say three things. Single parent homes, I'm not afraid to say it. Parent homes where the father is home and the father does not address certain situations, like wiping your backside, cleaning your armpits, brushing your teeth after every meal. That's why that girl don't like you in school. Those are the conversations we need. And the one who works 24 hours a day, and something I work on is that you need to take your time off. And like my son tells me, Daddy, you are the king of load management, because I'm not dying at 58 and having somebody else raise my child.
Yeah. Well, let's get to this question here. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's quite all right. It was good stuff. Thank you, sir.
No, I want to retract. When you use the word, discipline, I remember reading an article where parents are saying they're having a problem disciplining your children, especially coming from other cultures, because, they're afraid. So what they're telling them is that the parents are saying, I'm used to using corporal punishment, but you're telling me here now that I can't do it. So they're taking these children, to the psychologists, and the psychologists are not making the right diagnosis. So they give them, medication, Effexor or whatever, antipsychotic, drug they give the children this, and it doesn't help. The children get more anxious. And what they do is, children develop side effects from the drugs, suicidal, ideation, and they give them more drugs. And some of these kids, 13 years old, are on 10 drugs. Because, the psychologists can't make a proper diagnosis. So parents are saying they're having a dilemma.
Yeah.
And also, because society, parents are saying, society let them know the parent-child relationship and that I can't cross that line. So,
Yeah, I want to turn to my wife here just for a second, because she's a special educator. When it comes to this whole, well, you said a couple of things. One thing, the whole idea of punishment, this idea of punishment versus discipline, right? And just because you can't spank a child doesn't mean that you cannot discipline a child, right? Spanking is just one way of enforcing what you want upon a child. We could talk about that, but she mentioned something about children and drugs, and she mentioned also a socio-cultural sort of underpinning to this about kids coming from different cultures, or kids and their parents entering into the system that looks at that child and makes the determination that that child needs drugs in order to control their behavior.
A regular phenomenon. There's kids with disabilities who explicitly have like ADHD or some other disabilities, emotional behavioral disorders, that people think they need medication. That is a long road of challenges, right? Because when students are given Ritalin or some other forms of drugs, the first prescription is just an experimental thing. So it's like, okay, let me just give you a dose and find out how it works for you. It can take up to 30 days to figure out whether this Ritalin prescription didn't work. And then you get a new adjustment, right? Or, we may, after 3 months, or 6 months, we'll go try a different drug because this is not working for your kid. So consequently, you'll have these kids going from one drug to another and having these experiences that are not helpful to them. And by the end of the year, you may not have the right prescription in place. And consequently, the kids are feeling. I used to have kids in my classes who come to school as zombies in the morning. And by 11 o'clock, they wake up. By 1 o'clock, they're in trouble because all of this pent up emotion, they've just beaten up everybody, fighting everybody, but it was because of the drug. So then by 1 o'clock, they get the drug again, and then they go back home zombies. So it became a regular kind of experience. And this is just one kid. What about the whole class having these kind of drug issues? And some of the fears that people have about that experience, imagine having a child 4 years old starting that kind of drug regimen. By the time they're 8 or 12, they've been so accustomed to just taking so many different kinds of drugs that it's easy to take street drugs. Or I'm making that up, but it's easy for them to take other things in because they're used to taking drugs. Kids who don't take drugs often are reluctant to take things that are foreign to them. But if they are accustomed to, oh, well, there's just a pill.
Can I ask you a question? Is there a disproportionate number of diagnoses of kids with ADHD or some other kinds of diagnosis that requires drugs? Is there some sort of difference in race?
Yes, Black kids are identified. She has her hand up. Black kids are being identified as having the behavioral disorders. The whiter kids are more often given things like autism as diagnosis. Well, kids who are African American or African descent may have are of color, may get a diagnosis of emotional behavioral disorder, cognitive disabilities, or people have in the past called mental retardation, or anything that requires a drug, anything that requires behavioral intervention. Those are the things that are being identified for Black kids, and the ones that are more social in nature that require some learning specialists are the ones that other people are getting.
Okay, we're going to take a couple of more questions, and because I'm looking at your faces. I think that you are loving this, amen. But you don't want to love it all night, right? Yes.
Dr. Blue, there are kids who need medication, okay?
It's true.
But in order to prescribe kids for them to get that medication, there's supposed to be steps that educators and parents need to take in order to come to that conclusion. And not just parents and educators, but doctors. When we have children who come to us, and if you remember, there was a period where there was lead. The research is there, where there were issues with lead, toxic, lead, the toxic element, influence of lead. That causes some behavioral issues because it causes some brain damage to kids. But the research is there where Black kids are often much more streamlined. I'm looking for much more tracked for special education. One group are kids coming to this country from, let's say, places like Africa, the Caribbean, Mexico. Kids with second language issues, not the ones that come from Europe, and I can tell you that for a fact, okay? So what happens is they come, they have language issues. And because there's not this, they don't have a high, the language that they're coming with doesn't help them to do the transition into the English as a second language. So they struggle. They're not strong in their first language. And so they come and they struggle. And before we take the time to support them and to address the issue that they're facing, we sort of start to target them and label them. Okay, so that's one group. The second group are your kids who come into the system and they struggle because there wasn't that basic foundation. The research says that kids are supposed to come into school in the early years with a certain amount of language exposure. They should know how many thousands of words when they come in. A lot of times they don't come with it. And oftentimes teachers become frustrated. Oh, the kids don't know anything. No, they do know something. Maybe they don't know enough of what you expect them to know. So you're supposed to provide those opportunities for them. And because the opportunities aren't provided for them, they're being labeled. And so when they're being labeled, what I used to challenge my teachers with, okay, what did you do to support this child? What supports did you provide in your classroom for this child? Number one. Number two, we're not making any decisions until a medical examination is done for that child. You send the child to see a neurologist or first their general practitioner and then make referrals. And once that neurology report comes, because usually that will tell you where your child is in terms of any kind of psychological issues. And then you meet as a team. No one person should be allowed to make that decision about a child and what places. So there's several things that.
And you know full well too, as an educator, that some things happen in schools and in school systems because you get more money channeled for kids who are designated.
Yes.
I'll tell you a little story, right? My children, when they left Long Island, right? They were in the first grade and second grade. They were scoring on national tests 2 grade levels above when they left the church school. We moved to Buffalo, and they couldn't go to church school. They were in a public school. Our kids came home after about 3 weeks and said, Mommy and Daddy, Miss so-and-so gave us this work. And I'm saying, is that your teacher's name? I thought your teacher was so-and-so. No. And then my other son said, yeah, Miss so-and-so gave me. I said, how could you all have the same teacher? I said, what teacher is that? Oh, Miss so-and-so, she's the special teacher. My kids have been in the school system for about 3 weeks, and they placed them in special education without the knowledge or consent of their parents when my students, my children, were scoring 2 grade levels above the national average on standardized tests. So you got to understand that there's some tracking that goes on there, some pipelining, as you were saying.
So there are kids who are going to need medication because we've had some, but there are also kids who are just labeled without the proper resources, without people taking time to address what the real issue is. And so so those are the.
I just want to say one thing. A remedy.
And then this young man's going to have. He's going to have a last question because we need to hear from him.
I'm all about remedies. One of the remedies that you can do, Aaron walked out of here, is when you watch TV, make sure you put the subtitles on the TV. Your kids, it is a miracle worker. When they're baby and toddlers, when you go to channel 13 PBS, they have that. So whenever you watch a movie, football game or whatever, make sure the subtitles are on the bottom so they'll know how to pronounce their words or whatever is not used enough.
That's good news, right? Yes, sir. Young man, what is your name? Andrew. Andrew. All right, man.
Look like a Cowan.
All right, we're going to hear from Andrew now. Come on, boy.
So, remember when you said you should take your phone away from your kids?
No, we never said that.
And put it in your room?
No, we never said that.
And
we don't want to take away your phones.
So let it charge in your room overnight?
Let it charge in your mother's room overnight or your dad's room.
So for somebody like me who uses my phone for my alarm, how would that work?
I got an answer for that. When your alarm goes off in your mommy's room, your mom will come and wake you up.
And also, there's a little thing. There's also, way back in the olden days, and for old folk, they still sell these things. They're called alarm clocks. You can get one in Walmart for about $10. But you know what? Listen, Andrew. You know what? I'm going to give you an A for asking the best question of all day long because you were listening, you were thinking. Come on now. And you asked a penetrating question. Let's give Andrew a round of applause. That's good, Andrew. That's good. I was scared. Yes.
Yes, Dr. Blue, I just have two contributions to make. And one is about the disproportionate medication of Black and brown children. The research shows that Black and brown children are disproportionately medicated. They are more likely to be diagnosed as having ADHD. And one of the reasons for this is that white behavior is normalized. Black behavior is measured against white behavior. So if Black behavior does not meet the standard of white behavior, then it is deemed as abnormal. And all minoritized children face this obstacle. Some might not face it as much as others, but more than likely they do face this obstacle. Let me give you an example. One research placed videos in the classroom, and what the video recorded was that white teachers sometimes respond differently to Black students than Black teachers respond to Black students. And the video would show the white teacher responding to a white student kindly and gently, and responding to the Black student in a manner that was aggressive and not necessarily becoming as a teacher. And what that told researchers is that this teacher was more likely to see the Black child as disruptive. And you can see where the conversation goes from there. Then it leads to this Black child needs to be medicated because the behavior is disrupted. One of the things that researchers suggested that parents do is that parents need to be intentionally involved in their children's education. Now, I understand that parents are absent, but if you have to work consistently throughout your child's education, then you have to develop some form of a schedule that allows you to check in with your child regularly, a schedule that allows you to guide your child. And this schedule extends itself to digital equipment. One of the problems that children have is that they have unfettered access to their phones, as Gary pointed out. So here's what you do. And Dr. Blue, you mentioned it about, the impact that 2 hours worth of screen time has on our children. Here's what you do. You schedule the times that children can have their digital equipment. So, okay, after school, you come home, you have 2 hours or an hour with your iPad. Or throughout the day, you spend this amount of time, and you have that schedule right down. The final thing I'm going to say, Dr. Wu, you don't just make that schedule arbitrary. You sit down with the child and make the schedule, and the child has an input. So, Mary, how much time do you think you should have with your iPad this evening or in the evenings? Well, Dad, I think maybe I should have 2 hours. And Dad is going to negotiate it. All right, so why don't we say an hour and a half? And Mary will say, that sounds like a good thing. What happens there? Mary has taken ownership of creating her own schedule. And guess what? Mary is going to try to stick to her own schedule that she made. Just a little tip.
That's a good tip. That's a good tip. Now listen, we're gonna. All right. One last of the last questions.
We've heard so many problems, very little remedy, right? I know, but the truth is, yes, but I said so many problems, more problems than remedies. Mm-hmm. That's what I heard.
And you're absolutely right.
And it's almost like we're speaking to the choir, because most of us here are really using these tools already. So I'm just hoping that the people out there online are learning the skills that you're.
Let me cut you off right there.
Yeah.
Right? So we got a good dialogue. You are absolutely right. Some of the remedies we do overlaps.
Yes.
So let me give you one good one, right? Black people need to stop shouting at their kids. Bottom line. I don't care if you're from the Caribbean. I don't care if you're from Africa. I don't care if you're from South Carolina. Stop shouting at your kids. Because when our white counterparts or our Latina counterparts, I'm gonna say it clear, shout at their kids, they absorb that, and that's okay. Second thing, we need to touch our kids. How many teachers here have seen a kid crying and you start wiping their tears? It is the most magical thing. And I just found that out last week. Been doing this for 20 years. You wipe a child's, and I could guarantee you at that home, that kid has not had his tears wiped. There's a lot of problems, but there's things that overlap. I could guarantee you this. My white counterparts, they have their tears wiped by their parents or their grandparents. They don't shout at their kids. And if you shout at their kids, somebody's coming up to school the next day and say, I don't speak to my child like that, and you will not speak to my child like that. I'm just giving you two.
Right, and you're addressing my concern when you did what you just did. But my real question is, and it is to Sister Blue, is the church planning something? Because very soon we will be mandated to have a schedule in school wherein we have to teach sexuality. And we will have to teach it like how the public teaches it. So is the conference being prepared for that day?
He has to answer that question.
Well, let me ask. She doesn't, because she doesn't work inside the Adventist system, right? I can tell you this because I have worked inside the Adventist system at the higher education level, but it's pretty much the same. Our church schools are protected thus far, to be able to have our standards as long as they're in accordance with our doctrine. Will that change? It could change, but right now that is not the case. Right. It's on the public school curriculum, but we are not mandated in the Seventh-day Adventist school system to do that, and our church has taken a stand that it will not do that. And at any given time when we are asked to do that, then we have lawyers who are already prepared to go to court to address those issues in court. And I've spoken to some of those attorneys, and this is something that's already on the radar of both Seventh-day Adventist higher education as well as K-12. And so, yeah, it's a good question.
I understand that the church schools are protected from it. And so from an educator's point of view, parents, we can't leave everything on the schools. As we always say, it starts at home. And so we watch the news. We see it in the streets. And I work in a public school. I'm in Park Slope. And it was a hard pill to swallow. But now it's like, I believe in a God. And so I don't judge anyone because that's not my place. But I do know that as a parent, it's my responsibility to speak to my child at home. I can't wait on the schools. And of course, based on your child's age, you explain it in a way that the child understands without giving too much. So yes, it's in the curriculum, in the public school curriculum, but it's not in the church school curriculum. So as parents, not yet, but the world is going on while it's not in there. But as parents, we have a responsibility in multiple ways. And that's one of them where we have to start talking to our children about what's going on. But we use words that are child-friendly, but still get the message across. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to give our esteemed panelists some closing remarks here. And all right, esteemed panelists. All right, Sister Blue, and then
thank you all for taking the time to be here. I know that it's dark outside, the Sabbath's been long gone, but you're here, and that's a sign of your concern about children. And I think it's really important for us. I want to go back to something Gary said about parenting. One thing that we haven't talked about is the fact that there are absentee parents who work, who find entertainment, who do any old thing and leave their children at home. Some children as young as the one that you're holding in your hands, they're raising themselves. And you're right, the community around, people around know the children are at home by themselves. And it becomes really important for us to think about what is our role. So because we have such interested people here in this community, I think as a suggestion, I would say, maybe if you are able to search out, or if God places in your path a child who is a parent who needs some support, then maybe we have to think about how we support those parents. Because in my years of teaching, that was one of the biggest challenges, one of the biggest hindrances to student well-being. If they didn't have a parent who could answer to me about what was going on, if the parent was absent, never answered the phone was always dead, those are all signs that there's a drug problem, there's a psychological problem, there's a mental problem, there's a health problem, something is going wrong, that this child is not being cared for. And in order for us to, fill the church, be able to have a safe community, be able to have a safer society, we have to think about how we have a niche of helping children and their families who don't have the support. Some people just don't have a support base around them, so they don't know what they should be doing. Some people had children when they were too young and didn't have the parenting skills, so they don't know what in the world they're doing. They had a kid, they let them sleep in the house, but the child is on their own. And we have to come up with a different kind of scenario of how we're dealing with those kind of situations.
My closing remarks are, first of all, thank you. Big shout out to Dr. Harrigan. I don't want to sound like I'm endorsing, but I'm very proud of what's happening here at my home church. It almost brings me to tears. I bring greetings from the esteemed Lloyd and Griselle Graham, who's probably watching. I'm going to just try to truncate this as possible. Our kids need our attention. There's no reason for you to work yourself to death. There's a football coach by the name of Mike Leach. He died suddenly at 61 on last Sunday. By Thursday, he was replaced from Mississippi State. Regardless of how he is affiliated to Trump or what have you, his family misses him. Be like LeBron James and these athletes. Be the king and queen of load management. Monday is Christmas, then you take the 23rd off, so you have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You have to let your kids see you. Go outside. Go play in the snow. Go for a walk. The computers are taking us over. And I'll end with this. We need to lift up our men in our church. I had very good men here. When I didn't like what my dad said, there were men in this church that would hear what I had to say. And they would say, light is not that bad, And so in my younger days, when my son was 3, my mother-in-law, who has Alzheimer's, very emotional, Pastor Blue's first day on the job, I'll never forget this. Next day he was about to have eye surgery. Very traumatic for me and Nilsa. And my mother-in-law busts through the door and goes to Pastor Blue. And she said, Pastor, you must pray for my child. And me and Nilsa's like, shut up, don't be bothering him. He laid his hands on him and prayed. Don't know where this man is from. We do not highlight our heroes of the Black male as much as we can. I could name 7 or 8 of them, starting with Elder Bell, Baker. And we have to foster this because I don't have all the answers. And I got to tell you, when I see young girls with dangling earrings playing in gym and nobody has told them, sweetheart, take the earrings out or get a stud earring because you don't want your earlobes to tear. and the whole school is Black. Because I don't have a daughter, and I saw that and I know what it does. I said something. And most of your educators know, if that little girl goes back home and say that Mr. Graham did this, I'm under sexual assault and I'm trying to sleep with their daughter. You need to stop that. I have seen in my 3 years in private practice, simple turn hard to complicated. Talk with your kids. Work. Some of us, I hate to say it, you hit your ceiling. I don't care how much more hours you work, you ain't getting no more money. Your gold is in your kids, and take them outside. And I want to thank you for the time.
All right, thank you very much. As we get ready to conclude right now, our panel is going to exit the stage. I'll say one final thing. You are blessed. Oh yeah, I'm going to say this. You're blessed in this congregation to have educators, professionals, medical professionals, and others that can continue this dialogue, and I would just encourage you to do that. Amen? Please, please, please.
Can we put our hands together for our panel? We had such a fantastic day together with this Family Life Symposium, beginning from our early morning prayer service all the way down till this afternoon. I want to say a special thanks to all of the participants in today's program. And I want to say an extra special thank you for Rory and Ayanna Richards. They are the ones who birthed this idea. They are the ones who put it together, and they came to me and I said, fantastic, I will support it in any way I can. So just please give Rory and Ayanna a special thank you. God has been good to us today. We've been in this building for many hours. I know you're ready to leave, but when you step outside and the wind hits you, you may be tempted to come back inside. But it's all right. I'm going to send you on your way home. Let's all stand together. Shall we pray? Father in heaven, you have been so good to us, better to us than we deserve. We thank you for the family unit that you have put together. We recognize, Lord, that there are so many different types of families represented in your church. And Lord, we recognize that no matter what type of family unit that we are a part of, we all face challenges. But despite that, we can find solutions in Jesus Christ. And so we ask your blessing upon all the families. We pray that the things we have heard today, we will remember. The things we heard today, we will implement them. We will make a determined effort to keep the devil out of our families, to reclaim our children and our spouses and our relatives, and build our families up for your kingdom. Watch over us now, Lord, as we leave this place and take us to our destinations and homes safely, we ask. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a blessed week and travel safely.